We are all so busy these days, and we're always looking for helpful tips and advice on how to find a better work-life balance. We all have to earn a living and pay the bills, but are you doing enough to look after yourself and your health at the same time? Now, many of us prioritise careers and work, and we're slaving over our computers and mobiles all the time. But does this make you cut corners on your diet, exercise or sleep? I'm Dr. Ben Sinclair, and welcome to Health versus Wealth with Dr. Ben. Our guests share their life experiences and we discuss their challenges in their health and their wealth. I hope their experiences will help you with your life and health. Now, I'm joined today by Simon Phipps. He's 57, he is a top computer programmer, and he's worked on some fantastic projects over his working career. We often talk about health versus wealth and balancing this, and Simon seems to have achieved the goal. He seems to have managed to balance his health and his wealth. Simon, welcome to the show, and tell us, how have you done this? How have you managed to solve the puzzle of health versus wealth?
Somehow or other, I seem to have managed to do it. I've done it because now I'm retired.
You're retired?
Yes.
But, you know, how old are you?
57, 58
okay.
In May.
Wow. Okay, so most people are supposed to retire these days, I think around sort of mid-60s, late 60s. How have you done this at 57?
I'd always imagined that it was going to be, certainly for my generation, that we were going to be working till we, kind of drop dead or something like that.
Okay.
And kind of put that on the back burner. But a few years ago, got a financial advisor in and said, right, okay, where are we? Well, I've been putting money into pensions, been careful with the cash over the years. What's the state we're in? Basically, because we were in that situation of, okay, let's start considering what our next 10 years are like. He took a look at our finances and our setup and went, you can do it now if you want. So
wow.
I've actually been in a very privileged position over the past 2 years of being able to financially step away. And so kind of in the past couple of years as well, that's kind of given me the mental space to really start concentrating on health and winding up to a position that in December I've finally made the leap to.
Made the leap. Wow. Now, this is great because we've never had anyone on the show before who's actually retired, but also so young and looking, as I may say, in such great shape as you. So talk us through, how did you get into the world of work? Because, obviously there's a backstory here to this decision and the forethought that you've done. Tell me a bit more about how you got to be a top computer programmer.
Well, actually, I'm a kind of a designer, artist and programmer over the years. I grew up in the 1970s, obsessed with cartoons on TV. Always wanted to make animated movies or something like that.
Yeah.
Plagued my parents about getting a little 8mm cine camera and never got one.
Right.
And when I was kind of just coming up to my 16th birthday, a friend of mine got ZX81.
Was that a Sinclair?
Yeah, it's a Sinclair one. Yeah, black and white.
I used to pretend that my uncle was the Sinclair designer at school. He just got loads of kudos for that. Go on, so carry on.
So he showed me this Space Invaders, which was all pieces of text, and every time it updated, the screen flashed away to static and came up. But it was one of those things I was like, hang on a minute, you've got images on the screen that you can therefore change and manipulate, which was like, I now need a computer. So paper round, job in a Saturday job, saved, and then my parents threw in, and for my 16th birthday bought a BBC Micro.
So you're quite highly motivated at that age.
Yeah, it's been one of those kind of things of, I think I've kind of like had that, I've always wanted to know how things work, why things work, and having spent a lot of time as a kid with Lego and drawing and stuff like that kind of thing, and just being encouraged to be curious and to tinker. So when I got the computer, the first thing was, right, okay, then how do I get an image on the screen? Which you just have to figure it out. I can kind of, one of the things that I've always kind of if there's a thread all the way through my career, has always been that just need of like, okay, there's a problem here, I think I can solve it. It may not be the most elegant solution, but it's the best I can do, and I'm just intrigued by how things work. So with this, I started copying my versions of what I was playing in the arcades until I started making my own game, and a friend from school came in and went, you ought to put that on a tape and get that published. Somebody will have it. I was like, really? So put my little game on a tape, which had a
Yeah.
little guy in a jetpack flying around the screen in
Cool.
2D with little coloured sprites. Sent it off to a couple of companies, and one of them came back and said, "Oh, if you make these 10 changes,
Okay.
we'll publish it for it." A company called Micropower up in Leeds. So I did so. So I was 17, 18, 1984, and I got a game in the charts on the BBC
Amazing.
Micro, which got me a nice little chunk of money, which was nice, and paid for my first car.
What a great start at
yeah,
17. That's
yeah.
incredible.
And then I subsequently messed up my A-levels because I was far too interested in computers and girls.
Okay, yeah.
I'm actually very, very artistic, but I've also got this kind of like logical brain, so I was also
Right.
doing maths, physics and chemistry, and completely messed those up. Did a HND in computer studies.
Okay.
That was my backstop
Yeah.
at what was Nottingham Trent Poly.
Okay.
Had a fantastic time there and really enjoyed it because it was just sort of like, this is how computers work. Came crashing out of that into, right, now I can do some business programming or something like this kind of thing.
Right.
So I spent the next 5 months in a tiny cube farm in my hometown of Long Eaton, writing code for a desktop publishing package. And one of the things I'd been doing whilst I was doing my higher education, I was also working in a computer shop in Derby, a little computer shop called First Byte, and you had a little kind of gaggle of guys that were around there that were the regulars in the shop.
Yeah.
One of them, a friend of mine, Terry, he'd got into the games industry as an artist.
Right.
And so 5 months into my job of being in this kind of cube doing all my coding, I got a phone call from him saying, we're doing Master of the Universe, the computer game, the Dolph Lundgren movie. I need somebody to help me with the graphics. Would you, you still drawing and all that lot? I was
Brilliant.
like, okay.
So that was the opportunity to become more graphic based and get
Yeah.
into that side of things.
Yeah, so I turned up with a disc, thinking that they were offering me a freelance job, and they went, no, full time.
So that was that your first sort of paid graphic designing job?
Yes, yeah.
Wow. And what was the industry like in those days? What was the culture like? What was the working culture?
Initially, it was tremendously fun. It was basically me and 7 or 8 other guys in a room, all in our 20s, with computers all the way around, just making fun stuff and everything. Coming in 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, knocking off 5:30, and building out these games. And at the time, a game, you were taking probably about 4 months with a team of maybe 5 of you, and you were putting that over Spectrum and Amstrad, Commodore 64, PC, and Amiga and Atari kind of thing within the space of about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
Friendly, fun, a lot of banter.
Brilliant. And
Very
you just
good
mentioned like my first 3 computers. I had a Commodore 64, I had a Amstrad 6128, and then I had an Atari 1040 SD. So I probably played those games. In fact, you created Rick Dangerous, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yes.
And I used to love that because every time he died, he went wah.
Yeah, that was me. One Tuesday afternoon, Terry and I taking an old condenser microphone cassette player and screaming ridiculous noises into this thing, and then digitized the one that was funniest, and that mine turned to be it. So.
Now, I mean, you said it started off as this kind of happy, exciting culture, but I know you've taken retirement early for a good reason. What changed with the working patterns, and did it get stressful?
Yeah, well, over the years the demands on us became increasing. So slowly, one of the things actually about the games industry, nobody gets any overtime and stuff. And definitely in those early years as well, there were, I went into the thing thinking, well, we'll see if we can sustain it, and if we can get a few years out of it, it'd be fun. I can go back to business programming.
Yeah.
But there still was an attitude of, well, you're lucky to have a job, you're lucky to be doing this.
Right.
It's fun, so you kind of thing. We can afford to sort of lean on you a little bit.
Did that mean people just gave you punishing schedules?
Well, I say it's one of those kind of ones of you can never do enough,
right?
Really, sort of thing. So I found over the first within the first sort of 8 years, you were starting to be in the situation where you're doing late nights every evening, every weekend and stuff. And of course, the point is that I've got a very, very conscientious, productive streak I've learned within myself. And so the point is that when work is still there to be done, it's turning around going, oh, you can do me. Even to the point of, I don't really play video games very much, because in my kind of psychology, if I can spend an hour playing a video game, I've got enough time to spend an hour working on one. Okay. And so that's always been a real tension for me all the way through.
Were you working every day of the week? At
certain points, yeah, sort of thing. At the end of my, I worked for a company called Gremlin, who then folded into a company called Core Design, which I was one of the sort of founder members of.
So you were 7 days a week?
Towards the end, yes, seven days a week, and you couldn't work late enough, and you couldn't get in early enough.
And did you get holidays?
Yeah, we did do, but of course the point is that little wheels are still spinning in your head that, I've got to take the time off. Obviously, if you're trying to finish a project and get it out, then that kind of limits when you can kind of take holidays.
It's hard to slow down.
Yeah, it is.
Now, one of our previous guests had shaken hands with Tom Cruise before he came here. Who's Lara Cruz?
Lara Cruz became Lara Croft, who became Tomb Raider. I've got a tiny little story, because Core, who I work for, actually kind of created Lara. Basically, a bunch of us had been to what was I think it was at CES in Las Vegas, which is the big computer show over there.
And you were presenting at that?
Yeah, we will. Kind of occasionally, what will happen is you make a game, you then go over there to either visit it and do a research trip, or on certain occasions to present your game to various different buyers. So Toys R Us, Walmart, all come in, and you kind of give them a little pitch, and they all fly out. So you're on your feet for sort of like 2 or 3 days, just doing the script intense. And stuff. Oh yeah. It's quite a job. But yes, we came back from one of them, having seen all of the new 3D characters that were starting to come into the industry. It's a particular Sega fighting game called Virtua Fighter, which we all saw, went wow, and came back and said, this is kind of the way ahead, is to have three-dimensional characters running around in an adventure. And we'd taken on an artist named Toby Gard, who came in, did some spectacular drawings of a kind of Indiana Jones type character. Having done Rick Dangerous, which is a parody of Indiana Jones, that was a kind of a subject at the studio. So it's like, let's do something like that. As we were moving on, we were looking to diversify characters. This is kind of like in the 90s, going, let's try and have something more than just the white guy with the buzz cut. And so our creative director was kind of encouraging us to turn around and do different characters and stuff. And one of the things that Toby decided to do was to flip Lara and make this key character a woman, rather than just being an Indiana Jones clone.
Okay.
So my little tiny involvement in that was at one point or other being in the kind of meeting where it was like the nascent Lara was kind of looking very much sort of King Solomon's Mines, all sort of pith helmet and pigtails. Okay. And I was like, if you're going to call the game Tomb Raider, she doesn't look like she raids tombs. Okay. Have you heard of Tank Girl? So brought in all of my Tank Girl books for Toby, who he then used as an inspiration to make her look tougher, and that's where the character went on from.
Now tell me about some other, I know you've worked for some very prominent games. Tell me some other games that you've worked on.
Probably the first, you heard of a guy called Harry Potter?
What, never?
Yeah, I after working at Core, I worked at a company called Acclaim, and then after that one went to Electronic Arts, where in October 2000 I was taken on as the lead designer of the Harry Potter team. Fantastic. So I kind of came in with having read the first 2 books as a fan, and then for the next 6.5 years was sort of guiding a team of 150 plus through designing the games. And basically with that one we had to get each one of them sort of day and date with the movies as they were coming out. So it was quite an exhilarating, exciting process. So,
wow. Now, what was you mentioned stress earlier on. What was the impact on you of this demanding work culture? Yeah,
well, say the worst bit of it was probably the first kind of that sort of block of sort of 7 years at Core, where it went from being a fun sort of thing all the way through to sort of the mid-90s, where I was just working and working and working. The demands and the pressure was being put on, and so I can remember distinctly in that kind of last year, one day driving to work some Sunday morning and thinking, you know what, if I drove off the road right now, probably it would be a good idea. And that was kind of one of the things that made me think, hang on a minute, something's not right. Then the August bank holiday, feeling so stressed at work, I was out in the car park throwing up. Which of course, being the 90s, we didn't talk about mental health. We didn't have the concept. We just said it was stress, and occasionally had an aunt that had a nervous breakdown, but nobody knew what it was or talked about it.
And did you, you recognise these things, that thought of I might be better off dead because it was so stressful. Yeah. And you had this extreme physical reaction. Did you reflect at the time and take any action at that point? Did that start steering you in a different direction?
Well, it was quite interesting. It was one of those kind of things of used to that kind of knot in your stomach and feeling terrible and all this sort of stuff, and basically just trying to just ride it through because
that's what we did.
Because that's what you did, and actually the game wouldn't get out if you didn't work harder. You just had to shoulder it and keep on going. So the greatest moment for me was the day that I got fired.
How is that a greatest day?
Well, say the company, it was getting really kind of heavy. I mean, the culture was, we had a load of guys in their 20s all being pitted against one another, kind of thing, in a very kind of toxic sort of environment. Now, looking back on it, you're like, crikey, this was like Lord of the Flies. Yeah. Where, we're all kind of testosterone-y and pitching in and going for it. And there was a certain point where a lot of the guys were in private saying, I want to leave and everything like this. So I was like, well, I'll have a look to see whether it was feasible to even for a small bunch of us to leave and set our own. And so myself and creative director just put out the feelers. Anyway, that got back to the boss. The boss called me in and went, right, what are you going to do? I heard you're trying to steal my boys. So I was like, okay, I'm going to own up to this.
That must have been a gulp moment.
Well, it was one of those kind of ones. I was like, there's only one way to do this, and it's be completely honest. So I was completely honest, and I got fired. Wow. And the moment I stepped out of those doors, the sensation of relief of years and years and years just piling up and piling up. And I can remember the following day driving out over to see one of my friends and kind of driving up over the hills in Leicester with the sun coming up and everything like that. I was like, this is so much better. And that was kind of one of those things where it's like, right, whatever I do from now, I'm going to make some kind of change.
And so a pivotal moment.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And so the big thing for me at that point was to actually, the next job that I got was in Stockton-on-Tees. Now, I live in Derby, and I've always lived in the sort of Derby region and everything. What this meant was I actually was working away during the week for 5 days and then coming home at weekends.
Right. But did you have family and children at this point?
Yeah, it was. I had family, we were married at that point.
Yep.
And actually moving and doing this kind of like working away was the decision that gave us the sort of headspace and emotional space to actually have children. So I had my first lad after I'd been working there for about a couple of years.
Right.
But the great thing about kind of this very physical split was I'd get up in the morning at stupid o'clock on a Monday morning, drive up to Teesside, spend a week there, and then come home on a Friday night. Sometimes, actually, with the commute, I was able to pop down back on a Wednesday evening. But I had a block of time where I could work.
Yeah.
If I needed to work evenings, which I did an awful lot of, I could do that.
So still lots of hours, but you were separating home and life.
Yeah, and then it did mean that Saturday and Sunday were sacred. I think in the 5 years subsequent, I maybe worked one weekend.
So you got your weekends back?
I got my weekends back.
And it sounds like this was quite a long journey towards just beginning to claim back a life for yourself outside of work.
Yeah.
And what do you feel you've done since then? I mean, you're 57.
Yeah.
You're retiring, probably about 10 years earlier than most people. So what have you done since then to slowly claw back this quality of life that you so obviously exude?
Yeah, well, say when I moved on the Harry Potter team, that was down in Chertsey, which is down around the M25. So weirdly, I'd moved away further, but still managed that kind of thing. Great thing about I discovered working out in the gym in kind of like the 90s. That went out of the window in my first job, but then once I moved up to Teesside, there was a little gym in the block of flats that I was, the apartments there.
Okay, so able to do it.
Able to do that. Similarly, Electronic Arts, big American company, had their own gym and had a really supportive kind of HR system that was encouraging people to, kind of try and balance. So actually, it was that sort of thing of doing your best within sort of like the health knowledge that was around at the time kind of thing, lifting a few weights, doing a bit of running and stuff like
Amazing.
that. But maintaining this kind of like pretty disciplined, right, you can work yourself crazy, do all nighters if necessary, but then on Friday evening at 5:30, I'm out the door.
So shutters come down.
Yeah.
You're trying to counterbalance that with some intense exercise. And so why did you retire? You mentioned it briefly in the beginning, but why did you retire so early?
Well, it was one of those kind of ones of really it was that sort of situation that we'd had the kind of financial analysis which said we could afford to do so. My wife retired a couple of years ago, and then it was a situation of choose when you want to do that. And coming up to this sort of like towards the end of this year, last year, I was finding that the amount of things that I wanted to do outside of work, including spending a lot more time investing in my actual health and well-being, were meaning that my day was getting really, really packed. And it's like, something's going to have to give here.
Interesting. So there was a push almost like against work from your lifestyle.
Yes, yeah.
And that seems to push into work and force you to retire.
Yeah. Well, we'll say we're kind of coming up to the back end of last year, and it's like, right, I'm up at 6, make salad and food for lunchtime because we intermittently fast, so we skip breakfast. Get out, have a sauna, because we've built a sauna in our back garden, then go out for a 3.25 mile walk, come back in again, small sip of coffee, straight in front of the keyboard, 3 hours, 12:30 knock off, an hour making lunch, straight back to the keyboard, keep on working, 5:30, 6 o'clock, either on the exercise bike or in the gym or whatever. And so all of these things are packed in, plus I've discovered since in the past 10 years as well, getting home and having a little bit more time. I've got sort of personal art projects and making projects and stuff like this. So time was just becoming more and more scarce. Yeah. And it was quite exhausting, very rewarding, but something had to kind of give. And it was this sort of situation that was kind of coming up to the end of the year. It was like the project I'd been on, we'd kind of like initially scoped out that it was going to take another year after Jayne had retired. It's moved back another year, and we're kind of looking at the face of this project could go on for another year and a half. It's like, well, actually, I think...
Do you want that?
Do I want that kind of thing, sort of thing.
What would your advice be to anyone who is wanting to balance their health and wealth? They may be able to retire. What would your tips be to those sort of people who are maybe a similar sort of stage? Yeah. Maybe they're not thinking of retirement. What would you say?
Well, say the sort of the big questions for me were, have I got enough money to support myself? And one of the things was being in a situation where you're realistic about your own mortality. There's only so much money that you can have, and when the financial guy goes, you've got it, it's a little bit scary and daunting because you're spending all your time kind of amassing this number, but there is a certain point of kind of confronting and going, I've only got this many decades left. If the guy with the charts tells me I can do this, I have to kind of accept that sort of aspect of my own mortality. Then the next question was, have you done everything that you wanted to in your career? For me, it definitely was a case of, I've been around the world. I've done some amazing stuff. This whole experience has afforded a lot of variety, because going from little tiny 2D sprites to the giant worlds that we're making right now has been varied and everything. And then the other thing is there stuff that you want to do when you retire, and it's I want to spend much more time with my wife now because she's my best friend. She supported me for all this time. I want to, I've got myself into a pretty good space with health, with keto eating and stuff like this kind of thing. I want to take all the energy that I did in figuring out how a computer works and put that into how my mind and body works, and kind of apply the same kind of things, sort of thing. And kind of just go in there and take the leap.
Amazing. And you've done a great job of balancing things. I mean, what's very interesting is you've not just stopped, because I think a lot of people think of retirement as, right, I don't want to stop, what would I do? You've got this lifestyle routine that you take, some exercise. I know you do intermittent fasting, you do keto, and that's why you look in such great shape. And I think also you do some other activities that are non-work, but perhaps give you some benefits as well. Tell me a bit more about your other work.
Yeah, well, so
activities, just not work,
absolutely,
but activities.
Yeah. So I paint pretty much every day. I've kind of realised, almost like a lot of people do journaling.
Right.
I'm almost sort of doing a painting kind of journaling. So I've got a lot of personal sort of paintings that I kind of, like 2 or 3 years ago, I was during lockdown, just decided, hang on a moment, I'm just going to draw for myself, because the majority of my work is always drawing to someone's brief or to be shown or whatever. This was fantastic because it allowed my imagination to run riot, for me to practice my skills, which then paid off in my professional work, but was an outlet. Also, weirdly, I got into the world of cosplay and robot building.
Robot building?
Yes. So, 50th birthday, what do you want to do for your 50th? I'm like, well, I'm not going to jump out of a plane. I'm not bungee jumping.
Okay.
So we were, wife Jayne, she sort of said, well, let's go into London, spend a few nights away, maybe go see a show or something. Booked the hotel, and then found out that there was a Star Wars convention in London in the July. I'm like, okay, we'll get tickets. Give that a go, see what happens. Ended up building full costumes from scratch over that year, and got into the world of cosplaying for charity.
What do you dress up as?
I've got a full screen accurate Jedi costume, and also a stormtrooper.
Oh, a stormtrooper. I absolutely love the stormtrooper.
Yes.
What, did you build that yourself?
Yeah, basically I've got a friend who's down in the Isle of Wight, Ross, who has got a vac forming machine and has created a kind of kit, basically. And then in more recent years, I've also discovered the world of 3D printing, so I can build objects on the computer and stuff like that sort of thing. So I've built a full-size R2-D2. And
you've got a full-size R2-D2?
Yeah, he's and built all the electronics.
Does he do all the...
Yes,
whistles and stuff.
Yeah, I'd never done electronics, and it was a really good excuse to learn how to. So this is kind of the thing. Cool. It's kind of like I just like to figure out how things.
This is stuff you grew up on.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And you do some of this stuff charitably as well?
Yes. So there's a small group of us called the East Midlands Garrison. There's probably about 40 of us. We'll gather together for various different conventions, charity events, children's hospital parties and stuff like that kind of thing, and raise money for children's cancer.
So you've found the right balance. Finally, have you got any tips for people who want to find this balance, sort of looking at retirement? What would you say?
Get on YouTube and look up a load of good advice. There's a lot more advice out there. There are numerous health channels and science channels, so you can get all of the dietary advice and the latest research and everything. That absolutely fascinates me. Again,
a computer-based solution, which
yes.
I love. Simon, it's been so interesting talking to you today. You've raised so many important issues, and you've worked through a lot of these things, and you've demonstrated them and living them. I just want to say thank you for coming on the show today. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome.
And I want to wish you a safe journey home. So that's it for today. I hope my guest and I have helped you meet some of your health versus wealth challenges. Now, to hear more from me, Dr. Ben, why not subscribe on your usual podcast platform? And if you like my advice, or you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me on podcast@drfinlays.co.uk. Anyway, I hope to see you again, but for now, it's goodbye from me, Dr. Ben.